What's up, everyone? Well, today we're going to talk about these two junipers that I got at about the same time 2 years ago, I think. All right, well, it's not that surprising what I'm going to tell you, but I'm just going to go through it anyway. This was in a 3-gallon can, and this is a 5-gallon can, I believe. But I potted this down last winter, and it's now fall, so it's been about 9 months. And this has grown very slowly since I did that. Well, you know, when you cut off most of the roots and slam it into a tiny little container, you're definitely going to slow down a plant growing. Now, it's still sent out a couple of shoots that are, you know, at least an inch long, if not a couple of inches long. And the tree has gained some health in this growth that used to be very interior, because this was just a nursery plant that got cut back heavily. So, but the tree hasn't really given me what I was really hoping to see, which is some more interior budding right at these junctions. And it is starting to do that, but it's just doing everything that it's doing is really slow. And that's because I repotted it first and went after this design second. So let's take a look at this one, which I think is going much better than this one. This is a field-grown Kishu, and it's from legendary Northern California grower Jim Gremel, one of the last trees that I was able to buy from him. And it was kind of overgrown when I bought it, but what I initially did was similar to what I did on the first one that I showed you guys, and that is just take these long, big branches that have no movement or real taper to them and cut them back really hard. I left the top alone, so there's a nice big tuft of foliage up there, making sure that no part of the trunk dies back down here. Meanwhile, because it's getting lots of sun and it's in a big container, this has sent out in, well, I think it's been about a year, maybe it's been a little bit longer. It sent out these whips that are probably almost 12 inches long. So now I can actually come in and use some of this finer growth and make this trunk look a lot bigger. I'm not sure whether I'm going to use the upper part here, and I'm definitely not going to use the part above that. That's just going to be cut off, maybe not today, but eventually, to be used for cutting material. When I worked on this the first time, I did split off and peel out some of this, which has turned out nicely. I kind of like that. And so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to some of these other stubs. And in hindsight, I kind of regret leaving all of these stubs, because most of them just need to come off now, and the growth has, rather than coming out of the trunk in some cases, has come out of the stub. So this whole stub kind of needs to go, and all of these shoots are coming out of that stub. So I will be able to keep these guys. Those are coming out right here at the base of it, but I have to be careful not to peel those off if I'm going to peel down wood from here. Spent a few minutes wood pulling, and basically you saw me doing it already, but the process is just to grab tiny fibers and pull them down, and then as you pull down, they have a tendency to sever, but they also in the process make really interesting kind of textures and grooves in the wood. Now I would probably come in here and finish this up with a wire wheel or something to take off all the tiny sort of hair-like bits that are sticking out if the tree was anywhere close to being mature. And I was doing this kind of work. It only works when you do this on wet wood. You can't really do it very effectively on dry dead wood. So as you're killing things off, you come in and pull off wood fibers like this, and it really enhances, I think, the look more so than using cutting bits and carving tools, machine carving tools. So kind of mimicking the way that rough weather and snow and ice make the wood crack up in the mountains. So I'm going to do a little bit more of this. So looking at the side here, I went ahead and reduced this stub using that same set of techniques, and so there's some nice interest in the deadwood here now, and I believe I've managed to not do any harm to these remaining shoots. And now I have to decide, okay, what's the exact front, and what more can I do today, and what would it be advisable to leave for later? Actually, one of the reasons to do this work is that this tree, as it moves through life here, because I've made this shari here and it's wrapping around, we'll start to see more sort of delineation, more firm delineation between the dead wood and the live wood. And it really allows you to appreciate the way that the lifeline wraps around the dead wood, which is kind of an important feature in junipers. So I expect that once this dries out, then I'll paint it with lime sulfur after cleaning up some of these little bits or just letting them kind of deteriorate and fall off. And meanwhile, wiring these branches to add some movement. And one of the reasons I can't keep any more of these stubs is because these branches were never wired. So the trunk was wired, and then it was ground grown for a number of years, and then none of the branches that contribute to the taper were wired. So we can use a short section of one of them to create a top here, because I want to make this into a shohin-sized tree. But other than that, pretty much they just have to be reduced to dead wood. And so after I do that, all of the wood from the vigorous branches that are up above that's coming down is going to lay down more wood over and around these shari, I should say around the shari, on the lifeline here. And that's going to help the trunk not be round, like sort of cylindrical. And that will give the tree a more interest and more age in effect more quickly than it would happen naturally. So looking at it from the other side, I want to kind of keep my options open, because there's a good tree here, and this side's kind of interesting because the tree is more coming towards you rather than going back and then coming forward. So it gives it a really nice dynamic feel, and I might put the crown kind of up in here with a few of these lower branches. So I don't just want to go through and eliminate all of this, but I do want to eliminate some of the pieces that just aren't going to work either in the design if I was going to use this as the front, or in the design if I'm going to use the other side as the front. And one of those is these two large stubs on this side as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing and peel off. I'm going to take off the shoots that are on the ends of these, and I'm going to peel off the bark and reduce the stubs. Now on to a little bit of branch selection in these areas. I just want to kind of examine where there are multiple things coming out of one spot and reduce that down. And the reason isn't really because I'm trying to avoid reverse taper. It's really just that if I leave all of them, they'll kind of more compete with each other, where if I remove most of them and leave just one or two, that one is going to more quickly create a runner like this and start to form a branch that's more usable. If I was going to try to use this section of the tree, I would be keeping all this growth, but really all I want to do is leave a few of these strong shoots, and those will help continue creating wood down below. As I can thin off some of the side shoots to make sure that I'm not shading the portion down here that I really want to keep. All right, so like I said a minute ago, the tallest I'm going to go with this is using this as the center of the top. This is another option, obviously, if I wanted a bigger tree and it has good movement, but I don't want it to be that tall because I don't feel like the girth of the trunk supports that size tree for a top quality composition. And because this trunk is already looking really nice, I don't want to just sort of call it and make a mediocre tree. I really want to build a really good one. And so I'm going to concentrate on either this being the top of the tree or making it a shohin, and then I would be using this material down here. In any case, I don't need this, so I'm going to go ahead and remove these shoots and then peel off this stub so that it doesn't shade out or compete with this guy. And then this is essentially my sacrifice branch. All right, so now you get a pretty clear picture of what this tree is going to look like with this as the front. Some of these branches might be removed or reduced, but for the time being, this is pretty much all I'm going to do. So I can build the top from here. I don't need this. With the wood coming down from here, it's going to roll over some of these shari that I've created and create more interest in the wood underneath. If I come back and remove the bark here later, after another year or two of this growing out, I'm going to have rollover marks from that growth that happened here, but not where I did the shari. So that's going to make a much more interesting composition. And that's regardless really of whether or not I use this as the top or come down lower to the shohin-sized that's down here. It's going to have the same benefit in both places. So it's worth doing right now. All right, so I think that's kind of it for now. What I've done is basically just put some wire onto some of the larger shoots that were here in order to add some movement and whatnot. I could wire these, but there's not really much point because they're not big enough to do really anything with. And so what I've done is just kind of bring them down, spread them out, give them some movement, and then I will revisit this whole thing here in another 6 months to a year, maybe. So it's fall right now, mid-September, excuse me, and by the middle of next summer, I should start to have a reasonably good amount of growth here to work with, and then I can also reanalyze whether or not I'm going to remove this at that point. Basically, I'm waiting to see some good rollover on these shari that I've created down here before I remove the sacrifice branch. Because ultimately that rollover is going to make the tree a much higher quality, much more interesting composition. So circling back to what I talked about at the beginning of the video, in order to sort of fix what I have going on with this, What I can do is nestle this into a larger container of soil, just like I do with my mame trees. That will give it the impression that it is in a bigger container, and hopefully force some of these barely visible right now buds that are at the base of these kind of leggy branches. And when I say leggy, they're not leggy if this was a big composition, but obviously it's a small composition, and so I need really tight foliage. This foliage is usable, but most of this is not because it's too far out. So I could cut it back here, but I can't cut all of the foliage off the plant all at once because that's just going to slow it down further. So my next step is really just to give it a little bit more room to grow again, and realize that when you are developing junipers from scratch, if you pot them down too quickly, you're just going to slow the whole process down. And that's why I said that I think it was a mistake to go directly from a large nursery container like this to this. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have experience developing junipers and want to share it with everyone, put it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.